March 1940, the birth of the Dirlewanger Brigade, a symbol of Nazi depravity. Have you ever wondered if history could produce a brigade entirely made up of psychopaths? It's not just a chilling thought. It actually happened. In March 1940, as World War II roared across Europe, Adolf Hitler and Heinrich Himmler greenlit the creation of a special combat unit known as the Dirlewanger Brigade. Unlike any other force in the Nazi war machine, this unit wasn't forged from disciplined soldiers but from poachers, convicted criminals skilled at hunting illegally, who were seen as perfect for tracking partisans in the dense forests of occupied Eastern Europe. But this was no ordinary outfit. In a twisted mix of desperation and cruelty, the Nazi regime expanded the brigade by pulling the most dangerous inmates from prisons and concentration camps. Murderers, rapists, schizophrenics, and even disgraced ex-soldiers branded as unworthy. Training these savages wasn't about molding them into soldiers. It was about unleashing their raw brutality, turning them into a relentless killing machine. The birth of this brigade didn't just expose the moral rot at the heart of Nazi Germany, it showcased a deliberate strategy to weaponize society's worst rejects to enforce terror and domination. Welcome back to the History Unraveled Channel, where every secret of the past gets brought to light. Be sure to like, share, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button before we dive deeper into this dark journey together. Oskar Dirlewanger, from war, hero to monstrous criminal. Oskar Paul Dirlewanger, born on September 26, 1895, in Würzburg, Germany, came from a middle-class family, his father a lawyer. He served in World War I, earning the Iron Cross for bravery, and later joined the Freikorps to crush communist uprisings in post-war Germany. With a doctorate in political science and experience running a knitting factory in Erfurt, Dirlewanger might have seemed like an intellectual on paper. But beneath this facade lurked a depraved soul. In 1934, he was convicted of sexually assaulting a 13-year-old girl from the Hitler Youth, landing him a 2-year prison sentence, expulsion from the Nazi Party, and the loss of his doctorate. Yet thanks to his buddy Gottlob Berger, a high-ranking SS official, he wriggled free, fought in the Spanish Civil War with the Condor Legion in 1937, and honed his taste for violence. By 1940, Himmler tapped him to lead the Dirlewanger Brigade, igniting one of the darkest chapters of World War II. Dirlewanger's rise within the SS, despite his criminal record, screams volumes about Nazi tolerance for monsters who'd serve their genocidal ends. He wasn't just a commander, he was a living symbol of the regime's moral collapse, a man whose disturbing tendencies found a home in their war of annihilation, Poland and Belarus campaigns, the dawn of unspeakable horrors. The Dirlewanger Brigade first hit the ground in Poland in July 1940, tasked with maintaining order and rooting out partisans. But the reality? There was barely any resistance to justify their presence. Instead, they unleashed a nightmare of savagery, looting homes, assaulting women, and torching villages after stripping them bare. Reports reveal a chilling peek into Dirlewanger's warped mind. He'd inject Jewish women with strychnine, a deadly poison, just to observe their agonizing deaths, finding amusement in their suffering. This wasn't war. It was a perverse experiment, a thrill for a man who saw pain as entertainment. Even some Nazi officials recoiled at this behavior, but Himmler stood by his pet monster, calling him a useful tool. By February 1942, the brigade rolled into Belarus, joining massive anti-partisan sweeps. Here they killed at least 30,000 civilians, often herding them into barns and setting them ablaze, shooting anyone who tried to escape the inferno. They played a grim role in the Holocaust, too, working with Einsatzgruppen death squads to herd Jews into camps or eliminate them outright. Historians estimate only about 10% of their victims were actual partisans. The rest were innocent families caught in a blood-soaked frenzy driven by Dirlewanger's sadistic delight. He didn't just end lives, he turned destruction into a personal game, a macabre hobby that left scars across the region. The Warsaw Uprising of 1944, the pinnacle of barbarity. On August 1, 1944, the Warsaw Uprising erupted, a desperate Polish rebellion against Nazi occupation. The Dirlewanger Brigade was unleashed to crush it, and what followed was their most horrific legacy. On August 5th alone, in Warsaw's Wola district, they slaughtered over 35,000 civilians, women, children, the elderly, in a massacre so brutal it defies comprehension. They stormed hospitals, executing patients in their beds, attacking nurses and nuns before stringing them up alongside doctors. Infants weren't spared. Brigade members used them for bayonet practice, their cries drowned out by the men's twisted laughter. Survivors recall piles of bodies doused in gasoline and set ablaze, the stench of burning flesh haunting Warsaw's streets as Dirlewanger's men marched on, reveling in the chaos. What fueled this carnage? Dirlewanger's psyche was a dark pit. He didn't just follow orders, he turned them into a stage for his worst impulses. Inflicting pain, watching victims suffer, and orchestrating mass executions weren't duties. They were his twisted joys. Even Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust, ordered SS units to monitor the brigade, fearing their brutality might spiral and threaten German troops. Yet, despite the outrage, Dirlewanger was promoted and awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, a disturbing reward for his atrocities. Hey, History Unraveled fans, let's pause for a second and hear from you. What do you think drove Dirlewanger and his brigade to such extremes? Was it pure evil, the chaos of war, or something in the Nazi system that unleashed this nightmare? Could anything have stopped them sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to read your take on this dark slice of history. And while you're at it, what's the most shocking detail you've heard so far? Hit that like button if this story's got you hooked, and share it with a friend who'd be just as stunned. Now let's keep unraveling this tale together. Collapse and Dirlewanger's grisly end. Post-Warsaw, the brigade kept up its reign of terror, suppressing the Slovak national uprising in October 1944 and fighting in Hungary and Germany. But as Nazi Germany crumbled in 1945, the unit unraveled. Members deserted in droves, and Dirlewanger himself, wounded in February 1945, slipped away from his post. On June 1, 1945, French forces nabbed him in Altshausen. Hiding under a fake identity, he was unmasked by a former Jewish camp prisoner. On June 7th, Polish prisoners, survivors of his Warsaw atrocities, got their hands on him. They beat him to death, his skull crushed, a raw and fitting end for a man who'd inflicted unimaginable pain. No tears were shed for Oskar Dirlewanger. Historians like Timothy Snyder called Dirlewanger the most extreme executioner of the Nazi regime, his brutality outstripping even the SS's grim standards. He wasn't just a cog in the machine, he was a monster whose perverse joys shaped a legacy of horror. Yet controversy swirls around him. Some sources, like a March 2025 ex-post from a Hilbert Gar 19, note that even Germans balked at his methods, arguing he was meant to fight partisans, not slaughter civilians for amusement. But Himmler and Berger's unwavering support proves the Nazis embraced his depravity when it suited their genocidal agenda. Today, Dirlewanger's story lives on in books like Christian Ingrau's The SS Dirlewanger Brigade, and exhibits at places like the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. On X, debates rage, history speaks. July 2023 post slams his rise in the SS despite his criminal past. His legacy is a stark warning of what happens when power falls into the hands of the unhinged. A deeper dive. The psychology of a sadist and his barbaric games. What kind of person finds joy in watching someone die in agony from poison? What drives a man to order children killed in the most brutal ways imaginable? Oskar Dirlewanger's mind was a dark abyss, fueled by alcoholism, a history of assault, and an insatiable need to dominate. Experts might call him a sadist, someone who thrives on others' suffering, but that label feels too tame. His actions point to something more sinister, a compulsion to reduce humans to objects, toys for his amusement. In Poland, he'd force young women through degrading ordeals, watching their torment with a grin. In Belarus, burning villages wasn't enough. He'd stay to hear the screams, feeding off the despair like it was sustenance. His brigade mirrored this darkness. Recruits, thieves, predators, killers weren't just obeying commands. They were chosen for their own warped desires. They'd loot homes for the rush, torching the ruins not out of necessity but for the spectacle. In Warsaw, they didn't just eliminate threats. They toyed with their victims. Rounding up 500 kids in a daycare and crushing their heads with rifle butts wasn't tactical. It was a perverse celebration of power. Dirlewanger nurtured this environment, a conductor of chaos where every cry was a note in his symphony of destruction. Why did he act this way? War was his canvas. The Nazis didn't just accept his tendencies, they amplified them, giving him free rein to indulge his worst instincts. His past hints at a man broken long before 1940, but the SS turned that fracture into a weapon. He didn't justify his deeds. He didn't have to. For Dirlewanger, the suffering itself was the reward. To fully understand the Dirlewanger Brigade, let's step back to World War II's broader stage. By 1940, Nazi Germany was overstretched, its elite troops dying on distant fronts. Recruiting criminals wasn't a fluke. It was a calculated choice to terrorize occupied territories, especially Eastern Europe, where the Nazis aimed to wipe out Slavic and Jewish populations for their Lebensraum vision. Unlike the methodical Einsatzgruppen, the brigade's wild brutality was chaotic, almost theatrical. Less a unit, more a horror show, even by Nazi standards. Their toll wasn't just physical, tens of thousands dead, villages erased. In Belarus, they left behind wastelands, entire communities vanished. In Warsaw, their rampage crushed Polish resistance but sparked global fury, pushing the Allies to double down. Dirlewanger's death, beaten by those he'd tormented, closed his story, but it left lingering questions about accountability. Himmler and others who backed him escaped true reckoning, a gap that haunts history. For American history fans, this isn't just a tale of a far-off war. It's a lesson in power, morality, and human nature. Imagine this brigade loose in your neighborhood, turning Main Street into a graveyard. That's the gut punch. Evil isn't a concept. It's real, tangible, and devastating. Educationally, it's a case study in how regimes exploit the worst in us. The Nazis didn't create Dirlewanger's darkness. They found it, fed it, and let it run wild. It's a warning. Unchecked authority can amplify cruelty into catastrophe. What can we learn? First, systems matter. Nazi ideology didn't just allow this, it demanded it, rewarding brutality over decency. Second, individuals aren't powerless. The Polish prisoners who ended Dirlewanger showed that even in darkness, resistance can strike back. Finally, history isn't static, it's a mirror. Reflecting on this, we're pushed to ask, how do we spot and stop such forces today? For students, it's a call to dig into primary sources, letters, survivor accounts, SS records, to piece together the full truth, not just the headlines. Let's break this down for history buffs and classrooms alike. The Dirlewanger Brigade teaches us about escalation, how a regime's desperation birthed a monster. Start with 80 poachers in 1940, By 1944, it's 2,500 criminals, a ballooning nightmare. It's a lesson in radicalization, too. Dirlewanger wasn't born this way. War and ideology twisted him further. Compare this to modern conflicts. How do groups slide from soldiers to savages? Look at survivor testimonies from Warsaw or Belarus, available at places like the Holocaust Museum's archives, to feel the human cost. For educators, this is a gold mine. Pair it with maps of Nazi occupation, timelines of the Eastern Front, or even psychological profiles of war criminals. Ask, what drove Dirlewanger's men? Fear, loyalty, or something darker? Debate the ethics. Was his death justice or vengeance? For you, the viewer, it's personal. History isn't just facts. It's a tool to understand power's dangers, to ensure we don't repeat it. Dive into books like Ingrau's or explore X discussions. Our Shoah Ukraine's 2024 post calls the brigade a criminal cesspool, to see how this resonates today. Beyond the classroom, this story connects to broader themes Americans care about: freedom, justice, and accountability. The brigade's victims fought for their lives and dignity, echoes of struggles we've seen in our own history, from civil rights to war's aftermath. It's a chance to reflect on resilience, too. Warsaw's rebels didn't win, but their stand inspired others, a reminder that even in defeat, defiance matters. Digging into this, you're not just learning history, you're equipping yourself to spot its shadows in the present. The Dirlewanger Brigade and Oskar Dirlewanger are scars on history's face, a brutal saga of unleashed psychopaths. From poachers and prison rejects, they became a force of unrelenting destruction, leaving Poland, Belarus, and Warsaw in ruins. Dirlewanger's death in 1945 couldn't undo the tens of thousands of lives lost, but it ended a reign of terror. His story, horrifying yet educational, is a call to American history lovers. Peel back the layers, feel the weight, and learn from the abyss. It's not just about what happened, it's about why and how we keep it from happening again. Thanks for joining us on the History Unraveled channel. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next dive into the past.